So about a month, I don't know, maybe month, 7 weeks ago, time is an illusion. I put out a video about how Dawntrail, the fishing update, was probably one of the biggest and greatest updates to fishing since ever. And one part of that was talking about the level 100 skills, ambitious and modest slur. At the time, we didn't really have a full understanding of what exactly they did, and we had basically no idea what impact they were going to have on just fishing in general. And so now we're, 7 weeks into the expansion, and I can confidently say we still have no idea how big the impact is, but at least we understand what the skills do a bit more. So, to help me explain this and to kind of give you all an idea of how big of a change these ambitious and modest lure bring, I invited two other fishers who have been doing a lot of time and spending a lot of their time, I should say, testing and figuring out what exactly was going on with ambitious and modest lure. So, Chaos, could you introduce yourself first?
Sure. I'm ChaosComposer. I love fishing in this game. I do it a lot. That's really all you need to know about me.
And Calf.
Hi, I'm Kaf Kaleo. I also spend a lot of my time fishing in the game. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I have mentioned it at least on Twitter, probably that I have spent. I don't know, games like, what do I say? The game's been out for what, 7 weeks now, 6 weeks. I think almost 75% of my time has been fishing and testing things and recording guides and figuring stuff out. And a lot of it was based around the use of these ambitious and modest lures. And so let's get started with what the heck are they? These skills are both level 100 skills. They are have multiple. Oh, I don't know how can we put this. Many facets. There's a lot of different parts to them.
Yeah, we're gonna have to kind of break down because even the tooltip has many sentences, and there's some overlap, but there are kind of a few distinct, unique things that each one does.
Also, these tooltips are not very complete.
And as
They're
and
also bad.
I would say the ambitious lure tooltip might be the worst tooltip in the Fisher toolkit, if not the game.
Yeah, that's
and
fair.
and we'll get into that, but at a high level, what we have figured out these skills do is one, they reveal hidden fish, which we'll talk about, and that's probably the most straightforward thing these skills do. Two, depending on the lure you use, they attract fish of a certain hook set type, based on the amount is based on the number of stacks you have. And three, they can just almost have what I think we're calling like a mega slap, where they can just make it so multiple fish will absolutely not bite. And so there's a lot going on. I'm probably glanced over something, but I think let's start really, really simple. Let's start talking about what ambitious and modest lure do with regards to revealing hidden fish. These are so hidden fish are a new type of fish that they're not officially called a hidden fish, I don't believe. Can either of you confirm that for me? I don't think they're ever officially called hidden fish.
No, I think I randomly just called them that when I found the condor.
I think they're just called rare fish in the tooltip. I don't know if they have an official name at all.
Yeah, I guess real quick as well, the tooltips that say may also attract rare species of fish, this is what they are referring to. That line in the tooltip is not referring to big fish or legendary fish or any of that other stuff. It's that specifically these new types of air quotes hidden fish that are introduced in a few Dawntrail holes.
And for those of you who are going to be listening at home, the skills, or for those of you who are listening at home, yes, the skill descriptions are now currently going to be on screen. And for those of you who are able to watch, I have put them up on screen, but we will dig into what they are exactly in a little bit. But so hidden fish are this new type of fish that was added in Dawntrail, and basically they can only be caught when you utilize these lures, and these lures have a chance to quote unquote reveal them. And so you use ambitious and modest lure after casting, which is also a first for fishing. We have never had a skill that you used after casting that actually impacted the fish that you caught. Technically, collector's glove can be used after casting, and I think cast light can as well. But this is the first time that we've had a very active skill used after casting, and each time you use one of these lures, there is a chance that if there is a hidden fish in that fishing hole and you're using the correct lure type, you'll get a specific message that'll pop up on screen with a sound effect saying, hey, a wing shadow darts through the mists or something like that. And if the way that I've described it is if you were around and fishing pre 5.3, you may remember how old Fish Eyes worked. New Fish Eyes currently removes the time requirement for non-legendary fish from A Realm Reborn and up to and into Shadowbringers. But beforehand, it was required to catch certain fish where you had to use Fish Eyes to get a buff, and during that buff duration, you were able to actually catch the fish. So it was almost like an intuition on demand. But that was removed in 5.3, and it's kind of back now with the lures. And so I think we've been doing the lures have some interesting observations about when exactly they proc, and I think Chaos, I think you noted this earliest on about how some fish will not get the message procs until like a certain stack number.
Yeah, so I think for Copper Shark it was the most obvious, at least to me, first off. When we the first one that was found was the Condor, and that one, the hidden message can appear on any stat size. So we didn't really think much of it at first, but eventually on fish like Copper Shark, we realized that none of the messages would ever be appearing the first time we used the lure. It would only have a chance of appearing on either the second or third use of the lure, which you can only use it 3 times, we should say. And then what's the? I'm blanking on the name.
Clayren Carp, I think, is also 2 and 3, and Cloud Wasp.
Cloud Wasp, yeah.
Cloud Wasp. I have spent way too much time at Cloud Wasp. But Cloud Wasp will only trigger once you use Modest Lure, or will only have a chance to trigger on the 3rd stack of Modest Lure.
Yeah, and so since each time you use the lure skill, the GP cost increases. This means that for these fish, for Cloud Wasp specifically, every time you cast, you're putting an additional 60 GP into just having a chance for it to bite.
Yeah, so now with hidden fish, there is a potentially additional, depending on what other skills you're using, like GP cost. So now it's not just for straight catch fish, which all the hidden fish are. I believe there's 6. It's not just chum anymore. You have to use the lures as well. So now it's like, okay, am I going to use the lure or am I going to use chum and the lure? but you always have to use the lure to actually be able to catch it. So now, like with Cloud Wasp, if you wanted to use Chum, that goes from without using Chum, I should say, without using Chum, it's a 60 GP minimum. Like guarantee, like just to even have the chance, you have to spend 60 GP just to have the chance for Cloud Wasp. If you use Chum, that's 160 GP, which at our current, the current melds like I'm using is 1,000 GP. I'm using almost a fifth just for a chance, which is a ton of GP to use. And that's something that I know I've said in the past of there's a lot of GP that the fishers had to use, and in Endwalker we never really had to utilize it, and Fisher Dev kind of just came back and said, now you don't have enough. I think with this. So we have this added GP cost per fish, basically. So anything else that we wanted to talk about the hidden fish? Because that is kind of the quickest and simplest part of this skill. After this, fair warning, statistics might get involved.
Yeah, I guess real quick, some other things we do know about hidden fish is that once the message for the lure, the hidden fish is revealed, pops up, unlike the other aspect of the lures that we'll get into shortly, the fish is permanently added to the pool. So if you can keep using lures if you want, and it doesn't remove the chance for that fish to bite. We also know that
permanently added for the duration of that cast.
For the yes, sorry, that's a good clarification. You do have to do it every cast.
Yeah, and it should be noted that the lures only apply to that specific cast. If that wasn't clear already, as soon as you reel in a fish, or if you go back to like a cast ready stance, you lose any benefit that you got from the lures on the previous cast. But I think I cut you off there, Chaos, so sorry.
No, that's good. Good to be extra clear, because everyone knows the tooltips won't be. Yeah, the other thing we know about hidden fish, right, the reveal message will only show up if that fish is available to be caught. So for example, Condor is always available. That message could always pop up. Something like Urko Fraud, though, it took us a long time to... I think that was the last hidden fish we found, if I remember correctly. And we just couldn't get the message to pop up until eventually we found it. That means it is valid conditions for the fish to bite.
Yeah, it wasn't... Urko Frog, I think, was the last hidden fish, but the last script fish was Yellow Peacock Bass, which is not a hidden fish. It should, and like I mentioned earlier, it should be noted that none of the hidden fish are mooches, and the lures cannot be used on any sort of mooch. So we already know moving forward that any new fish we get that uses the hidden fish mechanic is going to be a straight catch. Now there's a lot they can do with that to make, say, mooching or big fish interesting, and we yet to see if they're going to actually do it. But I do want to make this clear that the lures do not work on mooches.
Just like one other like little piece of info. This is like something that's interesting to me. The actual hidden fish message trigger rates are fish dependent in kind of some interesting ways. So like on for the Condor, just from like some preliminary data, it looks like the message has a pretty equal chance to trigger on each use of lure. But for like some other fish, it has like an increasing chance to trigger on different hits. So I just think that's kind of interesting that it's like we can't really make any assumptions about how it will trigger.
Yeah, how the stacks work. I think that's kind of the way that we have to kind of always refer to this is as stacks, because each time you use either ambitious or modest lure, you gain one stack of that skill. And once you use that one skill, if you have one stack of either skill, you cannot use the other. So if you have one ambitious lure stack, you cannot use modest lure until you go back to that cast ready stance and then cast out again. And to Kaf, to what you're saying, we're still trying to figure out what the impact of the stacks are, and we're going to talk about that in just a second. I think on our list we had stacks next, but Chaos, you brought up the other message that you could see, and I think I want to go there first. And this other message you can see will apply to any fishing hole. The hidden fish message will only appear in fishing holes that have a hidden fish, of which, as of recording in 7.05, there are only 6, or just about 6, and they are all in Dawntrail, Dawntrail zone specifically. But there is another message that we refer to as a lure proc, I believe is what we're calling it. And this is a message where that will say, you have a feeling your next cast will be a large or small sized fish, depending on which lure you use. If you used ambitious lure, it would be a large sized fish. If you use modest lure, it will be a small sized fish. But I wanted to talk about those really quick, because I know, Kaf, you've been doing a lot with the numbers, or have at least been kind of helping out with that. And I want to explain what this message is, because we're going to be mentioning it a lot coming up.
Yeah.
So to start, whenever you see this message, you have a feeling your next cast will be a large or small sized fish. Despite what the message says, it is actually referring to your current cast, and it probably should be your next catch instead of cast. And what it means is you're going to be getting a fish that bites on either powerful hook set or precision hook set, depending on if you used ambitious or modest lure, respectively. And the way that this basically works is every fish in the game, and this has been a thing since before Dawntrail, I should point out. And what every fish has, sorry, I had to catch up my brain there for a second. Every fish is assigned a hook set. If you use patience, you understand what the precision and powerful hook sets are. Every fish is assigned one of those, and this has been a thing since patience was added back in Heaven's Ward for 3.0. And basically, if you use ambitious lure, say you use ambitious lure and you get the message, you have a feeling your next cast will be a large sized fish, you will only be catching fish that utilize powerful hook set, or like if you were using patience, it would require powerful hook set. Effectively surface slapping any fish that requires precision hook set, and then the vice versa for modest lure. And this has led to some interesting things and some interesting discoveries with the what we understood the hook sets were for specific fish. And Kaf, you've been leading the charge on getting confirmation on all of the straight catch big fish and determining their hook sets. Do you want to talk a little bit about that project and why that's now a little bit more important?
Yeah. So first of all, bless everyone who pre-Dawntrail actually put in the effort to actually collect hook set data on straight catch fish before it seemed like it was relevant at all. Because that has saved everyone a lot of time. Essentially, yeah, the thing about the big fish is they all have those 3 exclamation point bites, but not all of them are powerful hook set fish. which a lot of people don't realize. Some of them are precision hook set. And we have all of this data going all the way back to Realm Reborn of which ones actually are precision or powerful hook set fish that people have pretty extensively collected going through the years. It gets pretty spotty in Endwalker just because it wasn't really that long to collect it. But now with this guarantee message, we actually have the ability to very directly confirm whether or not something is a precision or a powerful hook set bite. So if you're fishing, for example, to use an example for one that was actually like very ambiguous, Star Scryer, I believe, in Endwalker. I'm gonna mess up the name because there's too many star things.
That is
Yeah,
correct.
that sounds right.
Yeah, that's the
So,
right one.
Star Scryer in Endwalker is very ambiguous as to whether it was a precision or a powerful bite. So there, because it's like kind of slippery too, so it was hard to tell whether or not it was actually preferring precision or powerful hook set. But if you get the guaranteed message, your next cast will be a large sized fish, then that confirms, and then you get the Star Scryer bite on that. That confirms that Star Scryer is in fact a powerful hook set bite. So we can use this to actually go back and 100% confirm all of the older big fish that we didn't have that information for before. So I've got just kind of a spreadsheet that I've been keeping, and every time someone confirms one of the old ones with that message and posts a screenshot, I've just been adding it to the spreadsheet. So filling in 99% of this is stuff we already knew, but we filled in some that weren't clear, like Star Scryer was ambiguous. And we've actually overturned
Legends
two.
were ambiguous too. I think what you have, just to cut in, you have Garliacthus, Snowy Paraxis, Lopoceros, and Fork were all also unlisted.
Those are unlisted, I think, due to lack of data. I know Onyx Knifefish was also ambiguous, but I think Star Scryer was like the really big, confusing one. And then there's two that were actually like completely overturned. Sovereign Shadow was one.
It went from we thought it was precision. Yeah, we thought it was precision, and it turned out it was actually requires a powerful hook set, which means it affects Ambitious Lure is the one that would affect it, not Modest.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
I didn't know that one.
And then Calf, I cut you off again on that one when you're talking about.
Oh yeah, and then I had to pull it up right now. And then Argonauta Argo actually also went from precision to powerful on confirmation. Aside from those two examples, everything else that we have confirmed has matched expectation, though. So,
and we're
since
still
all the
testing
ones that were
too, just to jot in, like we're still testing. Like I have the spreadsheet up as well. There's still a lot of things that we just haven't figured out yet because there's maybe at most 5 people doing this right now.
Yeah. If you get a confirmation message and it gets to a big fish bite, you can just post it in the fish court and tag me.
But yeah, and this is important to know because of not just like that the attracting of the fish and the slap and the attracting I'll talk about in a second. But it's important for us to confirm all this because Ambitious and Modest Lure have this impact, and they can actually change the balance. Maybe that's the right way to put it. Change the balance of the bite rates of a fishing hole. So making sure that we know which one of the hook sets is correct, is the correct for a specific fish, can really affect how we approach using lures at these fishing holes, or if they're even possible to be used, or even if they're even useful. But also one funny thing that I wanted to point out that I don't know if you guys caught when I was testing, it was Heaven's Ward and Soul of the Martyr, which fun fact about Soul of the Martyr, it is like the second longest bite in the game. if
Yeah,
not the
like what,
longest.
50 seconds something?
Yeah, it's like a 50-second bite. I think Deep Haunt is number 2, around like with an average of 40. But Soul of the Martyr, typically when we look at precision and powerful hook set, we can roughly guess based on the size of the fish. So if it's a very small fish, like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 ilms, which would be about inches, uh, that would be, we'd be like, yeah, that's probably precision. Anything bigger than that, we're like, yeah, probably powerful. And then there's a bit of like a weird middle ground somewhere between like 10 ilms to maybe 20 to 30 ilms. Soul of the Martyr is something like 37 feet long in game. It's a 37-foot long fish, and it requires precision hook set, which I thought was kind of funny and a great way to show that even when we find these patterns of really small fish are the precision hook set, and big fish, as in like physically large fish, are powerful hook set, there's always going to be at least one thing that'll come out and it'll be like, nah, I'm not going to follow that rule.
Every single fishing rule has an exception, and that's the only fishing rule without an exception.
Correct. Fishing, if fishing is anything, it is consistently inconsistent.
They really should have stuck with the weak versus strong nomenclature on that.
Yeah.
That's something else that I wanted to talk about really quick with Ambitious Lure, because it came up the other day when I was trying to explain this on an ocean fishing boat, and the description, that's the word I'm looking for. The description for Ambitious Lure says that it will attract large-sized fish, but it uses the same phrasing and punctuation as Prize Catch, which says will guarantee a large-sized fish. And Prize Catch guarantees you a large-sized fish in the sense that you get a large fish of whatever you catch, basically the old high-quality version, ones that can be used with mooch, ones that can be used with spareful hand, those types of fish. Ambitious Lure doesn't give you a large size fish. It just gives you a fish that would bite on powerful hook set, which just also happens to roughly be fish which are large. And so if you're looking at the Ambitious Lures, it doesn't work like Prize Catch. It doesn't work like Patience, where you'll get a large size fish, as in large size, the status maybe is the best way to put it, the modifier. Instead, you're just going to be getting fish which are just large, so bigger fish than normal, but not big fish. This is the other thing that has caused so much issues. Dawntrail may be the greatest mechanical update, but also has caused a lot of issues. I want to say specifically in the English translations, but when I translated back the skills for like Ambitious and Modest Lure, just to double check, from German, Japanese, and French, admittedly using Google Translate, sorry, they all basically said the same thing. So it seems to be like a very unanimous problem right now of the term large size is used in multiple ways.
At least as far as I can tell in Japanese, the terminology for large size, the property versus large size is in like a species of fish that is large, are using different terms.
Yes.
Versus big fish versus legendary fish, which have always been really distinct in Japanese.
Yeah, the Japanese have actual terms to describe big and legendary fish, whereas English, I think we just do like the kings and queens, I think is the term that is sometimes used. So whenever you use Ambitious Lure, we've talked about how you use it up to 3 times, and each time you gain a stack. And each time you use the skill, there is a chance for the message, you have a feeling your next catch will be, or your next cast, will be a large or small sized fish. Or each time you use it, depending on the stack, you may get a message for a hidden fish. There's another thing that the stacks do, though, And this is probably the thing that has been the most ambiguous.
Actually, real quick before we get into that, I do want to make it clear that the guaranteed hook set message, the one about your next cast being a large size fish, if you then say you get that when you press your second cast of Ambitious Lure, if you press your Ambitious Lure a third time, you will lose that guarantee unless the
yes.
message pops up again.
Skipped right over that.
So if you are hunting for something and you see that message, you want to stop using lure because you've basically made it already as good as it can get.
So if you're going for like a hidden fish and you get that message first and then you get the hidden fish message, like you've lost the guarantee, but you've got the hidden fish message, so you can like keep rolling to try and get a new guarantee, but like the guarantee is lost at that point.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's the one difference that Chaos you mentioned beforehand, where hidden fish message is once you get it, it applies to all of the stacks that you have until you go back to a cast ready stance and then cast back out. Whereas that message proc will only work for that one specific cast. If you use another lure right after it, you lose that chance, and that proc causes the mega slap that we were talking about, where if you use Ambitious Lure and you get the message, you will not be getting any precision hook set fish, any fish that would utilize precision hook set, and then the opposite for Modest Lure, where none of the powerful hook set fish would bite. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit when we get to the really fun part of this conversation, which is the actual impact on fishing. We're still going through the mechanics, everybody. We are like 30 minutes in and we're almost at the end. We're almost at the end.
For those wondering, what if you don't get a guarantee message? Does it do anything? Yes.
It does.
That's what we're getting to right now.
So the other part of the message for the Ambitious and Modest Lure is that it has an increased effect. I was kind of silly and didn't bring up the descriptions.
The tooltip for Ambitious, if you want it says attracts large-sized fish and increases your chances of landing one.
Yes.
That's the phrasing.
And then it would basically be the same, but for small-sized fish for Modest Lure. Thank you.
Yes.
Each time you use a lure, it takes a multiplier, or I want to say modifies the bite rate of fish which utilize the associated hook set, and increases the ones that are of the same hook set, and effectively, I'm going to say decreases the bite rate of those that don't use the hook set. So if we say, to kind of illustrate this, imagine a fishing hole and there are four fish in that fishing hole. Two of them require powerful hook set to catch if you're using patience. The other two would be precision hook set fish. If you use Ambitious Lure, and I'm going to, these numbers are not final. These are just kind of illustrative numbers. We'll get to specific numbers later, but just illustrative numbers. In that fishing hole, if you use Ambitious Lure once, then instead of each fish, say, having a 25% chance to bite, the powerful hook set fish, upon using Ambitious Lure once, may have a 27% chance to bite each, whereas the precision hook set fish will then be lower or less likely to bite with, say, a 23% chance. If you use it a second time, then the powerful hook set fish gain even more likelihood that they're going to bite. Say they each go up to 33% chance. So that's 66% chance you're going to get a powerful hook set fish. And then at 3 stacks, maybe it's 40% each. So there is an 80% chance, up from what originally was 50%, there's now an 80% chance that you are going to get a powerful hookset fish with 3 stacks of ambitious lure. And again, the same is the same effect for modest lure, except for precision hookset fish. And I don't actually know if that was the best way to describe that, because it's probably the most nebulous part of this mechanic.
That does kind of, as an explanation of why it's been 7 weeks and we still don't know all the nuance, is because every single fishing hole, will have a different distribution of fish and their bite rates. And as a result, using these lure skills will affect almost, in terms of just hard numbers, almost every single fishing hole is going to feel different when you're using these. So trying to come up with a kind of overall rule that works for everything, that's been the bulk of this process. So it's not as easy as saying like, oh, we get 5% on all powerful hookset fish.
It's
because
not,
it will depend on the initial distribution.
The percentage gain per stack is currently being tested to see if there's a static modifier. So like if you have one stack of ambitious lure, all of the powerful hookset fish have like this percent higher chance. 2 stacks it would be this chance or this percent, and then 3 stacks would be another percent chance. That's currently what's being tested. Kaf, I think I saw you. Did you have something that you wanted to add to that?
No, it's just sort of the way that it kind of sort of the way that it sort of is looking like it works, kind of to visualize it, is rather than looking at it as percentages, you can kind of look at it as if each stack of lure is actually like physically adding more fish of that hook set into the pool. And so it's kind of like crowding out the other hook set. And so the math for this is working out on all of the holes that we're testing it on, but we've only tested it on like 3 or 4 holes,
like 3
which
or
is
4
a problem.
Fishing holes, yeah.
And the problem is
out of like a few hundred.
Yeah. It's really rough. And the problem is like we don't have that, like it depends on the starting conditions for every hole, and we don't have that good data on every single starting hole in the entire game. Like a lot of the data that we have is really skewed by things like
longevity,
people farming for scripts, people trying to catch legendaries, people trying to catch big fish, people surface slapping things, weather conditions.
Target fishing is a big thing. I know that like for a lot of straight catch fish, their fishing holes are skewed in terms of the data that we do have access to, which is mostly through a website called Teamcraft. All of that data is skewed to target fishing just the big fish. So if there's only one ferocious bite and it's the big fish, all of the data we have is going to be centered around people getting that one bite. And if it's a simple slap and chum to get it, then a lot of our bites are going to be predominantly that one fish. And whatever the next highest biting rate fish is to slap. Like those are the only 2 things that we're really getting meaningful data on. I think
so to try and
good example.
To try and collect to try and get like actual values on this, we have to collect a lot of data on the base conditions and then a lot of data on each data point. So I just want to like quickly shout out a few people who have been collecting literally thousands of bite data points each, doing a lot of work on trying to get information to help us with just figure out what's going on. Lilac, Merthelin, Zenitect, Nefli, Selhada have all done a huge amount of work Thank all three of you for just how much data, sheer raw data, has been collected.
And
it's really impressive.
To kind of underpin that and just to help show the scale of what we need for statistical accuracy, a lot of the data that you get out of fishers, I think I was like the last video that I did like this was on the collectibles and how we don't know what the orange script fish is. The person who's working on that predominantly doesn't really report anything unless it's like looking at 15, 20, 30, 40 hours of continual good focused data. Not just the casual, I have Netflix up on the side, I'm watching an anime or something and going and oops, I screwed up a couple of bytes. No, like purely focused, running as optimal as they can data. A lot of the early numbers that we were getting on byte rates was like 2, 3, 400 bytes for the whole fishing hole. And everyone was like, oh, that's, some pretty good numbers. And then they added a 0 to it and it completely changed the numbers. And so I do want to just say that a lot of this data is we're looking at thousands upon almost tens of thousands of data points that we're going to need to get statistical accuracy to fully understand the impact of these skills per fishing hole that we test.
If you're wondering why it's taking so long.
Oh yeah, no, this is gonna take us months.
Yeah. And we can kind of make general statements about these sorts of things. Like in general, if you want more precision hook set fish to bite, you should use modest lure. But in terms of, well, how much better is it going to get if you do that? That's the type of stuff that will take months to figure out.
Yeah. We can say that it's a lot better though. Like that much we can say.
Yeah. We have a better understanding of what we did than we did 6 weeks ago. That's for sure. But yeah, so each time you use ambitious or modest lure, you gain a stack of that lure, and that stack increases the likelihood that a fish of the associated hook set will bite. And that exact number is currently still not known confidently. I know I feel like people were like, maybe the 1 and the 3 stacks were getting a little bit more accurate on the 3 or 4 fishing holes that we've been testing, but it's that middle one that keeps moving around a little bit too much. If I'm understanding that correctly, Calf, I think you were the one who's been around that one a lot.
No, all 3 of them keep squiddling around a little.
Oh, that's great. But we do have Chaos. I know you made a calculator that I use as well, where you've basically set up this calculator to recalculate what the byte rates are going to be based on what we know, using those multipliers, and then also made it so that we can just plug in what those multipliers are going to be. So if they do change, we can get almost instant updates on what method might be better or worse, and what the actual impact is going to be on a specific fishing hole. I think so. We just finished talking about the stacks, where again, each time you use a stack, the more stacks you use, the higher the likelihood of a fish of the associated hook set, where ambitious lure is associated with powerful and modest lure is associated with precision hook set. The more you use those stacks, the higher the chance. From what we can say, can we at least say with an asterisk and this may change, 1 stack versus 3 stacks of a lure has it's not linear is what we can see so far. So it's not like 2, 2, 2 each time. I think we can at least somewhat confidently say that. Or am I late?
Yeah, right now it's like the numbers we have, and this is squishy, subject to change, etc. We're getting multipliers right now of about 1.5 for 1 stack, about 2 for 2 stacks, and 3 stacks is like the most ambiguous. It's somewhere between like 5 and 7, depending on like what the whole is. You get diminishing returns when you get multipliers that high, so it's taking a lot of data to like pick that one apart.
And I should note that these multipliers are not saying 1.5% increase the likelihood of a fish biting, because there's so many different factors involved with the fishing hole. It's not going to be that clear. So I want to make it very clear that like that 6 doesn't necessarily mean that a fish is going to bite 6 times more often.
Oh yeah. Just to quickly explain what that multiplier actually means is instead of looking at it like percentages, if you actually had like 5, let's take the four fish in the fishing hole to start, like 2 precision and 2 powerful. If it was a 6 times multiplier on powerful fish, you literally take that 2 fish, multiply it by 6, and get 12. And now we have 12 powerful fish and 2 precision fish. So it's like whatever 12 divided by 14 is the new.
A very large number.
Yeah.
Well, a very
huge.
large decimal, less than 1. Yeah, so it should be known that unless you get that proc message that we were talking about, where it's you have a feeling your next cast will be a large or small size fish. Unless you get that, there is technically no guarantee that you are going to get a powerful or a powerful or precision hookset fish based on the lure you use. There's a likelihood you could get the opposite, depending on the fishing hole, depending on just basically the way things fall. I know I was testing ambitious lure at Lystracanthus to see if it was beneficial for getting Jaws of the Undeath to mooch into Lystracanthus more often. And I was getting a lot of precision hookset fish despite having 3 stacks of ambitious lure. So that's something to keep in mind that I want to make very clear, that 3 stacks of a lure does not 100% guarantee a fish of that associated hookset will bite. Most of the time, depending on how the fishing hole works, and some more of the fun stuff that we're going to start talking about pretty soon. But before we move on to actual like practical uses of this, I do want to mention the 2 things that we didn't actually touch on that weren't in our notes. I actually made some notes for this, and I didn't write them down. One is the re-rolling aspect. We kind of just glossed over one of the core mechanics here of the lures, which is each time you use a lure, the fish you get is re-rolled. Is probably the best way to put it. It is redetermined. So if you say you cast out and the game says you're going to get an aisle skipper, if you use modest lure, then it's going to go, okay, recalculate all those numbers using the weights that we were just talking about, which again are not final. Recalculate everything and go, okay, let's pretend they just cast it out again with these new numbers. What are they going to be? And maybe it's Isle Skipper again, but maybe then it's going to be Anthenia. Maybe it's Anthenia Dahlia, depending on the window. It's each time you use a lure, it potentially changes the fish that you're going to get.
And you do have to be careful with this near the ends of windows.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I was going to talk about. Is where before, sometimes you'd feel good about getting one last cast in at, 4:59 right before a window closes. And now, because the pool is recalculated when you press lure, if you cast out at 4:59, say the window ends at 5, and then you press a lure skill at 5:01, that window is now over. even though you cast out before the window closed, by pressing lure, one of the lure skills, you've re-rolled it at a time when when the window is open. So you do have to be a little wary of that.
Yeah, and I should point out that the lures and the rerolls are respective, as Chaos was saying, of the window, but also you need to make sure that you have like food. Like if you cast out with 3300 gathering with food and your food falls off and you re-roll, well actually if your food falls off at any time when you cast, it's gone, and that is not snapshotted, but that's especially noticeable with say re-rolling.
Yeah, so stuff like anytime you're using fish eyes, anytime Fisher's intuition is active, anytime a window's coming to a close.
Spectral currents.
Spectral currents, yes.
Yeah, and that's how it was actually confirmed. I remember that was how people tested it, was they cast it out at the very end of a spectral window. And it even said in the log, like, you cast out into the Galadian-based spectral current and waited for it to fall off, or for like the spectral current to go away. Then they would use modest lure or powerful hook or ambitious lure, and they would get a non-spectral fish despite having cast out during the spectral current. So you have to be really, really careful with that. Windows, intuitions, both of these are things that you have to be very careful with when you do that. The fort guide I put out last week at this time, that's one of the things that it utilizes, is we actually precast for our window 2 Eorzean minutes before it opens, because that's the amount of time we need to get 2 modest lures out. And then our third one we don't do until 1 minute after the window opens, which is when we would have cast it out anyways for the window using the older methods. So want to be careful with that. And it's also something that will come up in a little bit when we start talking about the impact on fish. The other thing I wanted to talk about, and this is something that has come up a lot, just questions to me, questions in the fish cord, about what happens if you re-roll a fish and that fish's window has passed. Say you cast out and you decide to wait 20 seconds and you use modest lure. Can you get a fish that had a window, a bite window from like 2 seconds to 15 seconds, even though that window is closed? Could that fish still bite? And the answer is yes. Chaos, do you want to explain how that works? Because you created a image for that, and I'm going to probably put that image on screen right now as well for those of you who are watching, but Chaos will explain it. And go from there.
Yeah, so all the fish in the game have when you cast out, they have a certain window of time that they can bite, whether it be from like 2 seconds to 5 seconds. After 5 seconds, that fish will never bite. So when you've cast out, and if you see, whether just by counting manually or if you have a cast macro, that 5 seconds have passed, you can confidently rule out that the fish currently on your line is not that fish. But now that we can re-roll, once you re-roll, you may be asking, well, what's the deal with that? So a couple things. It's not a new cast in that now I have to wait 2 to 5 seconds again, or say a fish bites only later than 30 seconds, like a lot of the big fish in the game do. If you say you're 20 seconds into a cast, you press lure, you might think, am I going to be waiting another 30 seconds? No. So it's a little bit complicated, but when you press lure, those skills have a 2.5 second roughly cooldown, meaning that's on the global cooldown, so you can't press you can't reel, you can't press lure again. it kind of locks you in for a second. I guess you could reel, but you can't reuse lure. And so in order for the game to let you... Actually, now I'm confusing myself. I don't think you could reel in a fish.
No, you couldn't. Once you use the skill, once you use the skill and it goes into the global cooldown, you can still you could still hook, but nothing's going to be biting.
Yeah.
So you couldn't reel anything in to begin with during that 2.5 second cooldown of the skill. And I want to quickly, if I can quickly just jump in and say, for those of you who are also thinking it, I tested it. Skill speed nor spell speed affect the recast of Ambitious and Modest Lure as far as we can tell. Anyways,
no crazy melts.
The meld spell speed for increased casting meme did not come true in Dawntrail. Anyways, I'm sorry. Go on, carry on, Chaos.
Yeah, so the game is nice. It gives you 2.5 seconds, but if a fish isn't going to bite in those 2.5 seconds. But the game's a little bit nicer than that. After you press the lure skill, it gives you that 2.5 second cooldown. The game says, okay, maybe you want to use lure again. So we'll add a little bit of time in where nothing can bite, so that maybe you can decide to either early reel or press lure again. I believe Nefli is the person who first came up with the 3.5 second timer from when the message appears. I believe, Fruity, you mapped it out. It's a little bit closer, depending on pain, to about 5 seconds from when you actually press the lure button.
Correct.
So once you press the lure button, about 5 seconds, again, it's a little pain dependent, there's nothing that can bite. Any fish that would have bit in that time period will not. And that gives you a little bit of time to decide to use another skill, early reel, whatever you want to do.
Yeah, it ends up being anywhere between 4.5-5 seconds. Nefli measured it from when the message appears in your chat log. So whenever you use a skill, there's a message saying something along the effects of you attempt to attract a large or small size fish. It's an additional 3.5 seconds or so after that message appears, but it takes roughly 1.5 seconds from using the skill until when that message appears, because that's based on the server and your connection to, that's based on your connection to the server, because all fishing is server side. So basically that's the time it takes for you to use the skill to go to the server, the server to re-roll the fish, and then send that information back to you, and then say, okay, you've attracted a new fish. So that's kind of how that's been mapped out. So it's roughly 1.5 seconds until the message appears, and then roughly 3 to 3.5 seconds after that message appears until a fish can bite at the earliest.
Yeah, so once you have that kind of cooldown time and that time has passed, to go back to when let's use that example again. You've pressed lure at 20 seconds. We have a fish that can bite at 30 seconds, and we have a fish that stops biting at 5 seconds into the cast. We're going to kind of keep, even though we re-rolled at 20 seconds, we're still going to use that timer from our initial cast, and after the 20 seconds, give it the additional 5 seconds of cooldown. We're now at 25 seconds from the original cast. If the re-rolled fish was that fish that stopped biting at 5 seconds, or any other previous fish, it will bite immediately after that 5-second cooldown. So you would see a 25-second bite from a fish that normally stops biting at 5 seconds. Because of the lure ability. And then, say, if it re-rolled into the big fish instead, that normally would start biting at 30 seconds. After that cooldown has ended, which would be 25 seconds from the original cast, you then would only have the next 5 seconds to kind of get ready for that big fish. So because its window hadn't started yet, its bite timing window hadn't started yet, you can kind of view it as being unchanged by the pressing of the lure, because we did it early enough where that grace period, that 5-second grace period, didn't overlap or cover the window in any way.
Yeah.
So any fish that bite later than the grace period, you can kind of view it as untouched or using the original bite time. Any fish that could have bit during or previous to when you pressed the lure will bite immediately after the grace period ends, no matter what that original fish's bite timing was. So you can't sort of use it to cheese or skip fish and remove them from the pool by pressing the lure later. That's not how that works. They thought of that.
Yeah, and that's something where, actually, first, I think it should be worth mentioning, if you use chum, then chum reduces the bite time of any fish by 50 seconds, or 50 seconds would be ridiculous. Whoa. Sorry.
Chum too.
50%. So if you cast out without chum and a fish is going to take 16 seconds, if you had used chum, it would bite at roughly 8 seconds. Is from what we can tell is the average bite reduction. The lures respect that. So using fork as an example, fork with chum bites no later than 8 seconds. Without chum, that would imply up to 16 seconds. If you use modest lure 3 times, that takes you, I think I mapped it out. If you cast and then use modest lure immediately, and then 3 times as much as you can, that would end up around 12 seconds, which meaning you would still have 4 seconds until that fork is going to bite. But if you use chum, it's going to bite immediately as soon as that grace period ends. So you want to be, you need to be a little aware of bite times if there's going to be shared tug types that you're searching for. And I think verbally it's a little bit difficult to explain. So like I said, I should, if editor Fruity in the future remembers and does this correctly, the image that Chaos created explaining the bite timeline and how biting works with, or the bite times work with lures, will be on screen right now. And will probably be going away soon, so quickly go back and look, or if not, you can come in during here when we're talking about it.
And while that image, I believe, still does use the initial 3.5 second estimation from Netflix, just know that it would work the same, about 5 seconds from when you actually press the button. Just the number might be different on the image.
Yes. So
it was early.
Yeah, you created that pretty early on, and so there's a lot that has changed. And technically, the 3.5 seconds is not incorrect, but just the measurement of how that was taken and then accepted on how we were going to measure changed a little bit. So instead of, it is 3.5 seconds from when the message appears. That is correct. It's 5 seconds from when you use the skill, basically, roughly. So now that it's, I think, have we covered everything that these skills do now, like mechanically?
I have one like super last thing that I want to just quickly add,
Perfect.
which is we don't know the guarantee message rates, but we do have enough data at this point, I think, to say that the rates are bite dependent. This is
for the message procs,
yes.
Right? You have a feeling your next cast will be either a large or small size fish, not the hidden fish procs, which have their own bite rate, which have their own rate that we're still determining. But this is specifically the guaranteed large or small size procs.
Yeah, so those guarantee messages are dependent on how many fish of that hook set type there are present to start. So if there's very few powerful hook set fish and you use ambitious lure, the guarantee for a large sized fish is going to be happening at a much, much lower rate than if there were a lot of precision hooks at fish to start. And it seems like with each subsequent stack of lure, the odds of that guarantee go up, although there's not enough data yet to like confidently say anything more than that or anything definitive. So that's just like what we have on the rates so far.
I think a good example of this, Calf, you and I were testing earlier this week with Golden Papyra in Mural's Tears and the Raktika Greatwood, where there's 3 fish that will bite on robber balls. One is Golden Pipra. The other is like...
it's like Clabo.
Clabo, and then another Pipra. If you slap one of the small fish, like one of the precision hook fish, say the Clabo, if you slap that and just use powerful hook set, which Golden Pipra has, a very, very low bite rate compared to the precision hook set fish that are going to be left in that hole. And so the chance of procking, I think you and I went for easily 15, 20 minutes each, which was probably what? I mean, we were spamming Ambitious Lure just to see if we got a proc.
And there's literally nothing else that uses Ambitious Lure there.
Yeah, and there was nothing else. Golden Pipra is the only Ambitious Lure powerful hooks that fish in that fishing hole on that bait. I should note that these numbers are all based on the specific bait. I'll talk a little bit more about this in a bit. But it took like 15, 20 minutes for us to get a guaranteed proc. I think for a hot second, you and I both thought that it was going to be precision hook set.
We actually were both. We had like one of us testing precision, one of us testing powerful, just in case.
Yeah, just in case. And it ended up being powerful hook set, but it took,
as expected.
It took like I didn't catch how many lures I used, but it was close to probably 50, 60, 70. I wouldn't be surprised if it was like 100 like lures until I got that proc to guarantee the bite, to confirm that it is a powerful hook set fish. So if you want to go home and test that yourself, grab some robber balls, go to Mural's Tears when Golden Pipra's up, or when it's not, use fish eyes, and then cast out and just use Ambitious Lure and see how long it takes you to get that lure, the proc message. And that'll give you a very good idea of how it's related to bite rate.
Incidentally, if anyone wants to be my best friend, if you can get a Cinder Surprise bite on a guaranteed proc, that's going to be one of the worst ones for us to confirm.
Oh gosh, yeah, because Cinder Surprise. Actually, this is a pretty good segue before we get into that.
Yeah.
Did we forget any of the mechanics? It has been over an hour, and I think we covered all of the mechanics of the skills.
Yeah, now we get to the fun part.
Yeah, now
I think if the tooltips for these skills were written properly, they would be the longest tooltips in the game.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people were like losing their mind over what Starry Muse.
Starry Muse, yeah.
Starry Muse for Pictomancer, and I'm like, y'all don't know. you guys do not know how bad this could be.
No.
That's a whole other conversation. I will just say, I think the way that they are written is fun enough for exploration, but as I mentioned on Twitter, I think my next 2 years of my guide writing life is going to be spent explaining that a large size fish is not the same thing as a large size fish and just explaining what the hell that means. But another conversation for another day. Let's get into the really fun stuff. So now that we know what these skills do,
sort of,
let's start talking about what this means for fishing in general. And this is going to be beyond just looking at hidden fish that could be added. This is, how can these skills be used now? And there are some absolutely ludicrously wild things that we can do. So let's. I know on our list we have like this thing in order. I'm going to jump around a little bit on our
Yeah.
outline here. I wanted to talk about Drepanapsis. I think Drep is a very good example of a fish that was mildly annoying. Drepanapsis is a legendary fish during dust storms at any time in the peaks, I believe,
Yes.
in
Grim
the
and Enid.
Grim and Enid,
Yeah.
and it is caught during an intuition with that is triggered by catching 2 bond splitters. Now, what's worth noting is bond splitter is the only powerful hookset fish in the fishing hole. Drepanapsis, during the intuition, is also a powerful hookset fish, which means we can now utilize, and there I should also point out there's like what? Besides bond splitter and Drepanapsis, there's like 2 other fish, and they're both precision hookset.
Uh,
Is it 2 or
2
3?
on the bait. Yeah.
Yeah, 2 on that specific bait. Sorry. When I say that there's 2 on, whenever I refer to fish and like the number of fish in a fishing hole, it is based on a specific bait. I should clarify that. So, Drepanapsis, not the worst legendary fish, but also not necessarily the easiest. You were looking at maybe 2, 3 intuitions per weather window, which is about 23 minutes at most, like if you're lucky. You can now show up, catch like an Enid crab, which is a precision hookset fish, and then just use ambitious lure and wait until a fish to bite. Wait for the fish to bite. You don't have to fish for procs. And it greatly increases the chance of bond splitter biting to the point where Chaos, I think you and I spent a couple of days messing around at the Grim and Enid, and my first time there using ambitious lure, I walked away with 4 Drepanapsis, which is unheard of beforehand because we're able to use ambitious lure to greatly increase the chance of bond splitter biting. And with more chances of bond splitter biting, the more likely we are to catch it. The more likely we are to catch it, the more likely we're going to get intuition. And then during intuition, if you just slap the bond splitter and then use ambitious lure, Drepanapsis is the only ambitious lure fish that you can use. So you can, I think you said you got Drepanapsis within 1 hour of within 1 Eorzean.
Yeah, there was the window I did was I did the full 23-minute window. There was a period of time where I landed a Drepanapsis at I don't know, say 4 a.m. and by 5 a.m. I had gotten my set another one. Just from very, like we said, very fast bond splitter bites. Specifically, it's not just that it's the only powerful hook set, it's the fact that there's only one other precision hook set fish with a fish slap. So that those multipliers we talked about earlier suddenly get way more potent. And it got to the point where easily more than half my casts were either bond splitter or Drepanapsis during that time period.
Yeah, and it's to the point where I've set up a fishing challenge, which is a thing that I'll talk about in the future. But they are a new type of tutorial that I'm creating, and Chaos has been helping me test a few of these. But fishing challenges, like I have one of them where it's like catch 5 Drepanapsis in a single weather window, and that's not something that is out of the question right now. I've gotten very, very close on like 2 casual attempts. But yeah, so we have this ability now to not necessarily guarantee fish, but basically really, really swing it in our favor. Bond splitter is a really good example, I think, of that, where the fish would, maybe you'd get 2 intuitions a window, and the slap during the intuition. Maybe it's Enid crab, maybe it's bond splitter, depending on how you're feeling. But now it's like you slap a precision fish, you use ambitious lure, you catch a bond splitter. Because now if you get the proc, it's guaranteed to be bond splitter because it's the only powerful hook set in the fishing in the hole, and you can basically walk up and just get it. You don't have to. I don't know if I would recommend now for Drepanapsis. I don't know if I would recommend like any sort of early prep.
Yeah, you don't need anything.
You don't need it. It's one of these fish where you could, if they cut the window in half, that would still be very generous, whatever.
Generous
Poor
fish.
trap.
I'm
poor trap.
Yeah,
it would be very generous. There we go.
it's definitely one of the more notable victims, we'll say. I
Another
don't know
one,
why I've been calling them victims, but
nerfs. They're nerfs. I think is probably the best way to put it. Is that they're nerfs towards specific fish. And for those who are listening in who maybe don't understand big fishing, think of big fishing, which is fishing for these very rare conditional fish, or sometimes not rare, but just these unique fish in these fishing holes. Consider them like raids, like boss fights, and fishers, raiders, we've had 6 raid tiers now. That's 60, 70 just raid fights. Fishers effectively have a few hundred now. And the way that we have to approach some of these fish is to develop a strategy. The best way to do it is you have to follow these certain rules or these guidelines to be able to get it. And what the lures have effectively done for some fish is nerf the fight. Made it so that, I don't know what the equivalent would be in combat, like an echo, maybe?
You unsynced it.
Yeah, unsync. Because that's the other thing, too, is a lot of our fights would be synced. Because the higher the gathering doesn't mean that the fish is less likely to stay or less likely to bite. It does not care about your gathering outside of the fact you have enough for the game to say, yes, you have enough to be able to even have a chance to hook this fish.
yeah, I guess the way to put it is that fisher power creep is done through skills, not any sort of, in most cases, not really any sort of eye level.
Yeah.
Or stats outside of maybe GP a little bit,
but I think if we're gonna put big fish as in the metaphor of bosses, the long-standing big boss was Ruby Dragon, and it got nerfed with ambitious lure.
Yeah, it's not quite as strong a nerf as Drepanapsis, where you're not going to be going away with 5 Ruby Dragons.
Not as dramatic.
It's not as dramatic, but it definitely makes it. I think one of the ways that I described the Fisher Kit skill is that it makes fishing a lot more active. And what we can do now, and I actually have these numbers up on my screen now. On my screen, I'm not going to put them up on the video screen, so you can keep cleaning the kitchen if that's what you're doing right now. But looking at the numbers for Ruby Dragon using those lure multipliers that are not finalized yet, I would like to point out, but using what we do know, cure with TC bites, which cure mooch into Ruby Dragon or themselves. They're like the key to getting Ruby Dragon. Base level with a coral snake eel slap, tongue twisters, I am so sorry. It bites at about 40% of the time. Doesn't feel like that, I know, but with the coral snake eel slap, it's about 40% bite rate base. With ambitious lure, it becomes almost 50%, a coin toss. with the current numbers and currently what we have, and this is going to be a little bit fuzzy because data is a little skewed and stuff like
Yeah.
that, but it's notable. It's like 11% more, 10 to 11% more of a byte rate. And now if you tie in Spareful Hand, the level 91 skill, where you can store mooches, you can now, between midnight and 4 a.m., where you would normally just go and cast Chum, hope for a bite, it's not, do it again. Now it's, you cast out, you use Ambitious Slur up to 3 times to go for more cures, and then you stock them. And so I've done like 3 or 4 windows now where I've gotten 3 cures ready that I can mooch, and that's 3 free mooches at the start of the window.
Yeah, and where previously, if you happen to catch a cure on your first attempt, you're, not sitting there for 12 minutes until the Ruby Dragon window opens. You say, oh, cool, now I can try to get a second one.
Risking that you bump your controller and move.
God, that happened to me at least once.
Oh, it happens to everybody at least once.
Awful.
So, yeah, it's not a big nerf, but Ruby Dragon now has this idea of, or now can really utilize these new skills. I actually think that this is probably the best form of going for Ruby Dragon, not because like statistically it's the best way, because you get more mooches, which means you get more chances at Ruby Dragon. But it's just a lot of fun. Like, it is a ton of fun going for Ruby Dragon now, more so than it was before, because it is so active, because it is, you have to put a lot of thought into making sure that your GP's working, making sure that you have enough resources available for when the window starts, because you're doing a running start. Beforehand, you would be, you would get your cure, and then you would wait. And you would just, stand still until then, and your GP would regen, and you'd go in with like a full tank of gas. With this new method now, you're going in potentially not at full GP, maybe your cordial's on cooldown, and you have to figure out how to actually work this. And I might have a guide out on this soon. I need to review my footage to make sure that it's clean enough for me to use. But I might have a guide on Ruby Dragon coming soon using these new methods. And it's just a ton of fun. But it's also a good example of how Ambitious Lure can be really useful, even though there's still precision hooks at fish in the window, or in the fishing hole. And that's something else too, Calf, you and I have been talking about, or talked about a little bit, of what's the point at which Slap and Chum is actually better than Ambitious Lure or Modest Lure Spam, one way or the other. And there's actually a few windows where it is. A few fish, I should say.
I guess. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think probably the one that, like, I mean, aside from obviously the examples of fish where there is no other bite to reduce or increase against, so like Elad Scan, where everything on that bait is precision hook set, so using Modest Lure literally does nothing. So it's pointless to even use a lure.
Except there's a new method where it might be, and I'll talk about that at the end.
Rerolling?
Yeah, using the reroll. That's, I haven't even had a chance because it's on its vacation right now. I haven't had a chance to test it, but we'll get to that in a minute. Carry on.
Yeah, that's some advanced tech. But in terms of like actually like increasing the odds, an example of a fish that actually has like both bites present in the pool, where the lures don't really help much, is Moratecta for lancetfish. I've been going for a lot of lancetfish stuff. I hate lancetfish, and I'm obsessed with trying to kind of kill it once and for all. And so I've been going for a lot of Moratectas, and I've definitely not personally seen any improvement from using lures. And I know you made like a little spreadsheet to try and do the math on lures versus Slap and Chum. And at least from like the numbers that we have right now, Slap and Chum is literally better than lures with the numbers we have.
Yeah, notably so. With the numbers we have, it's not a huge crushing difference, but it's enough that it's like, no, actually, you don't want to use lure at all. Like
Yeah,
it would be a notable hit.
I believe, because that's a hole I had looked at in my little kind of preliminary calculator. And with those current multiplier estimates, even at 6 times or whatever, 6 or 7 times, um, the effect on Moratetto was still only like maybe 2 or 3% versus just its normal pool. So
Yeah, I
that
think I
definitely kind of feeds into that idea of, well, we don't need to use it all the time.
based on the current numbers that I have right now, it's a uh, less than a 1% increase using ambitious lure. And the calculator that Calf was mentioning, there's the balance with using the lures versus slap and chum is coming down to not only just the fishing hole but the timing, because because of that grace period, that cooldown from when a fish can bite after using a lure, that extends a lot of methods. And an example of this that you can go and look at right now is Furka aka Fork, the legendary fish from Endwalker caught in Leith. It originally, we would say, show up early, catch a, oh gosh, what did we say? An Irabanian, I think was,
Yeah.
yeah, you catch like an Irabanian or an Isle Skipper, one of the two. You'd catch that, you'd use chum, and if you didn't have a bite by 8 seconds, you would reel in, and then you would cast back out, and you would get about, I don't know, 9 or 10 casts per window that way. But if you use Modest Lure, you're going to only be getting at most 6 casts, maybe 5 depending on when you start. If you cast early and then like pre-roll and then or pre-stack the lures and then use the last one in the window, it's 6. But if not, it's 5. Like you're getting 5 or 6. That's basically it, but it's less. And you're like, wow, that makes no sense. How can be casting less be giving me more of a chance for a fish to bite? And that's because of the stacks that we were talking about earlier, where the more that you use a specific lure, the more likely a fish of that specific hook set is going to bite. And now the thing that's taking a lot of time is figuring out where's the point at which slap and chum is not as effective as using Modest Lure, even though it's going to be less casts per window. With Fork, yeah, you're only going to be getting 5 or 6 casts per window, but you have I actually, hold on, I have the numbers here. So this is very, very early numbers, so do not hold me to these numbers specifically. I'm doing a lot of testing on Furka Kawada right now, and I hope to have more data by the end of the year. But right now, based on the calculations that I have, each cast of slap and chum is about 0.3% chance that Fork is going to bite. Whereas if you have 3 stacks of Modest Lure, it's going to be 1.25%. Which, yeah, okay. If you're getting 8 or 9 casts per window, that's looking at, and let me slightly adjust my number here so I can get a more accurate number. There we go. If you're getting, say, 9 casts per window with slap and chum, that's only roughly, and again, these are variable numbers, 2.67% chance in that window that Fork is even going to bite. But if you do 6 casts with Modest Lure, with 3 stacks of Modest Lure, that number actually goes up to 7.27% chance that Fork is actually going to bite, which makes it way better, like significantly better to do that. And these are the things that we have to go through for each of these really noticeable fish, of figuring out which one is going to benefit. And if it is, how much is it going to benefit? And is that benefit worth the effort? Is it actually going to be realistic for somebody to go through and be like, yeah, I'm going to use Ambitious or Modest Lure 3 times this whole time? Because it's not always cut and dry. So that's kind of where a lot of this big change in the fishing strategies is coming from, is figuring out, which one's better? Is it the old method statistically better, or is the new method statistically better? And it's a ton of fun figuring that out. So much fun.
It's a lot of fun, but it's also a lot of time.
It is a ton of time. The amount of spreadsheets I've had, I showed some of my spreadsheets, like the calculators and stuff, to a friend, and they were like, are you okay? Are you insane?
Yeah,
But
it's gonna sound a little weird for me to say this, but I'm sure there's going to be a lot of older, easier fish that we're just never going to have a definite answer for.
and it's not, and it might not always be because it's hard to tell, but because we'll just look at the fish and it'll be like, it's not worth the time to put into figuring that out.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, oh gosh, what would be a fish like that? Like, quickly bring up the Carby tracker here and just pick a random fish off the top of the head here.
Old softy.
Old softy. Old softy. That is not high on my priority list. Though honestly, I may just look at the numbers afterwards, and because that'd be fun. But like old softy, doesn't matter. It's a pretty easy catch to begin with, so we're not going to put a ton of time into that. We're going to be looking at fish like ruby dragon, fork, Elliot's gone. Actually, I think we're already pretty confident that Cinder Surprise probably won't need the lures unless the reroll method maybe comes into play, but that's still not high on our list right now of trying to figure out what it is. We're still trying to figure out what that definition of when is it good versus when is it bad. So there's a lot.
I guess that's kind of it's a decent segue. There are a few cases where, like Drepanaspis, it's very clearly good. So when we were kind of first figuring out some of this stuff, one of the first things I did was I basically did a cursory glance through Teamcraft at all the different fishing holes. And any fishing hole where the big fish of the hole either was the sole biter on its relevant hook set, so the only powerful hook set biter, the only precision hook set biter, or if there was only one other fish that shared that property, that all meant that it had the potential to be possible to guarantee that fish to bite if the guaranteed hook set message appeared. So again, while that message does not always appear super frequently, as you guys alluded to with Golden Papyra, I found there were about 30 old big fish that could be now guaranteed if that message happened to appear. And even without that message appearing, because they would be the only benefactor of the kind of multipliers from those stacks of lures, those are all good candidates for fish that would be very strong to use lures on.
And we've started looking at a few of them. I think one of the first ones we looked at was Bond Splitter. I just did a video, it was a couple of weeks ago, on Hardhead Trout and Xenocanthus. I think that's another good example of a fish that is also very conditional as well. Like, it's really good to use Ambitious Lure when it's not cloudy, because if it's cloudy, Mione fish is up as well, which sort of ruins everything. So there's just so much that we have to go through and explore. And I think some of this list we're even looking at, and I looked through it, and I was like, oh, maybe I did my own look through, and I'm like, oh, maybe Astrotrivia would work. Deepaunt, Maru Crab was actually a bit of a surprise one. I don't know if you guys saw my my short post on Maru Crab and how Modestler
I
is actually
did.
beneficial for that one. Maru Crab is a mooch, and we've already established that the lures don't work on mooched fish. But something that is useful is if you're using short-bill minnow, there's only two fish that are going to bite. It's either going to be stormfish or ancient shrimp, which you mooch into Maru Crab. Well, before this, you would catch a stormfish, slap it, then catch an ancient shrimp, then mooch it, and then just repeat that over and over again. With Modest Lure, because Stormfish is a powerful hookset fish, it would benefit from Ambitious Lure, and Ancient Shrimp is a precision hookset fish, it benefits from Modest Lure. We can now, instead of using Slap and Chum, we just use Modest Lure. And 99% of the time, don't quote me on that number specifically, but it's very high, more often than not, you're going to be getting an ancient shrimp. So now you get almost 100% uptime on Maru Crab, whereas before it was 50% or so.
And that's a great example of that 60 GP tossed per a full lure combo. That's outweighing a 200 GP surface slap, right? So
plus chum.
yeah,
if you wanted to use
that.
it, plus patience, plus a lot of things. You could use a lot of different skills there. I think Maru Crab technically got nerfed because of makeshift bait, but now this is like Maru Crab is on my list of fish to make a new guide on soon, because this is so much easier and quicker to deal with and easier to explain to somebody who's maybe just trying fishing out, to say, instead of going, all right, well, you catch a stormfish, then you slap it, then you cast out again, and then you do this, then do that. Now it's just like cast out, use Modest Lure 3 times, stop if you get a proc, catch the thing and mooch it, and just do that for 8 minutes. Way easier. Some of the other fish too, I think we were like, I have your list up, and I have my Trello board up, which is a nightmare right now because it's just full of fish that it's like, hey, we should test this.
Yeah, there's a lot of fish that mooch off of kind of rarer or like less common mooches that are significantly easier to get with the lures. I know I have a list that you posted at one point, Fruity, that's like also got just like Anomalocaris, Riddle.
Yeah, Riddle is actually that one.
Not so bad.
Riddle is one that I don't think is going to benefit as much, but I need to double check that. But Anomalocaris is. That's one, and also I have like a personal vendetta against this fish. Anomalocaris, you can use Ambitious Lure to do the same thing as Maru Crab, except with cloud cutters. So now you, instead of, and it's an even less chance, it's not even 50-50 with Anomalocaris and getting cloud cutters. Like, so you basically go from like a 30-40% chance of getting a cloud cutter up to almost 100. And that's really beneficial because Anomalocaris is a slippery bastard.
Another one that I see here that I've personally tried is you can use Handy Hamsas to get Thavnarian Caimans for Maya Men like almost trivially now.
Yeah, that one. So this is the other thing that I think I mentioned in my Dawntrail video, where there's a lot of reward in using Ambitious and Modest Lure for knowing the window and knowing the fishing hole. And the thing that you need to know with, like, say, Maya Man and the method of using Modest Lure to get Handy Hamsas to mooch into Thavnarian Caimans to get intuition for Maya Man is Maya Shell is up for like a majority of that window. So you have to fight against that as well, and you have to make sure that you can react to that properly. Another thing that I, unrelated to that, was using Handy Hamsa and using Spareful Hand to stock them before the window to then mooch after your first intuition is gone, to then basically force into a second intuition very quickly.
Yeah, jumpstart that. That's clever. I didn't think of that.
So there's not a lot of fish that you can do that with, because there's not a lot of fish that can have their int triggers caught off mooches. So like Maya Man is probably going to get another guide, and that one was already a pain in the butt to make because there was so many varieties of ways that you could get Thavnarian caimans, and now it's like I don't know how I'm going to handle that one. But like, yeah, so like, but not to not go down that rabbit hole too far. Maya Man is a good example of a fish that is going to get a lot easier the more knowledgeable you are about the fishing hole and when things are up and how things are going to react and what bites are what. And being able to utilize the lures and the spareful and like spareful hand to be able to actually like really make that window work for you. And there's a bunch of other ones too. I know that there's the list that we have here. I know, Calf, you pointed this out before I even mentioned it, but it was on my list. Magic mushroom. And everyone's probably like, wait, what? What fish is this? I don't remember this fish. It's a crab in the Sylphlins. And it's actually kind of annoying. But with Modest Lure, it's the same method with Maru Crab, where you can just Modest Lure your way into a mooch, and it becomes a whole lot easier. I don't want to say, actually, I mean, it is a whole lot easier, but it becomes a lot more consistent, I think is probably the better way to put it with Maru Crab and Anomalocaris and Magic Mushroom is...
Yeah, they're still annoying.
they're still slippery, but it's now more consistent. So it's... them getting away is less traumatic because it's not once in a while, it's something that's just going to happen. And I haven't ran numbers on those yet to see what even the chances of them biting with the new bite rates and assuming like a 100% uptime or 99% uptime mooching. A lot. So there's a lot that we can still do with these fish and these skills, and all these old fish are just getting nerfed again. And I think a lot of the things on my list here are ones that I already had guides for. There's a ton of fish that I haven't even started looking at that I don't have guides for. I think Ambling Caltrop is one of the potential ones that I don't even have on my list, that I've seen some people are like, oh, maybe you could use Ambitious Lure for this.
I've done a few bit game fishing attempts of Caltrop. It's still Caltrop, I'll say that much.
Ambling Caltrop is the new everlasting fish that just will not change. But I think the more time we get with these skills and the more we understand Ambitious and Modest Lure, the more effective we'll be able to use them. Going back to what I was talking about with Aelidskan. Aelidskan is in Long Mirror Lake in Ilmeg. It's a Shadowbringer's legendary fish. It is one of the fishing holes where the whole fishing hole on bait bug is all the same hook set. There's a good number of fishing holes like this where like the big fish or the legendary fish are all the same hook set. So at the surface, the lure stacking, where you'd be like more likely to get a specific hook set, isn't really going to do anything for Aelidskan based on what we understand so far. But the reroll is, and this is a method that I have seen a couple of people mention, and I think V Ness in the Fish Cord was the first one who I saw tested it and reported back on how it worked. But basically, their method is you cast out, and if you don't get a bite for Aelidskan by the time you would normally do that, which I believe is 8 seconds, I think, again, 8 or 10 seconds with Chum.
With Chum closer to 8, yeah.
Yeah. If you don't have a bite by 8 seconds, use Modest Lure once to get that reroll. Wait 5 seconds, and if you still don't get an Aelidskan bite, use it again. and you keep re-rolling it. So now instead of waiting for 8 seconds plus the cast plus reeling in, you basically can get up to potentially 3 more casts for a discount of 10, 20, 30 GP and less time, for 5 seconds at most. So it's this interesting idea where the window that I did, I got, let me bring up my math here, my number. So I click through all my spreadsheets. It's a nightmare. I got 6 casts in a single ALID-SCON window, which for those who don't know is about 90 seconds real life, or it's 30 Eorzean minutes. I got 6 casts. V was like, yeah, I got like 10 or 11. I'm like, whoa, hold on. That's a huge impact, potential like increase, where instead of taking 20, 30 windows for, I don't want to say 20, 30, but maybe instead of taking 10 or 15 windows for ALID-SCON to bite, now we might be looking at half that or 75% of that, which makes it a whole lot nicer with that method. I don't know if either of you were seeing that very short conversation that V and I were having about it like a week ago.
I did see it and I just completely forgot about it.
Yeah, it's a very creative way to use this skill, but not something that you would imagine doing if you didn't understand the skill. I think that was kind of the point that I wanted to try and make is you really know these skills, you can really start doing some wild stuff.
Yeah, that's some great knowledge about, okay, I've re-rolled twice. Now there's more fish that are going to bite instantly because of the chum applications. And then knowing the timing of when the grace period ends versus when fish can actually start biting again. You're going to, in order to fish effectively with that method, you're going to need to be able to determine, is a fish not biting right now because it's the grace period? Is it not biting right now because it's some other late biting fish, which means I can re-roll again to try and get another scon bite. So it's very, like you said, very rewarding of knowledge and
awareness and focus, which I think is great, because that's always been like, everyone's like, well, fishing doesn't have any skill, it's just related to, it's just RNG. I'm like, one, the skill in fishing is knowledge and being able to act upon that knowledge. I think I talked a little bit about that when I was talking about sidereal whale, which I would point out got a slight nerf thanks to Spareful Hand. That's the skill, I guess, basically is the way to put it. It's like, that is the skill in fishing now, is you have to know the windows. So, go ahead.
As a note, I did actually try something similar to that rerolling with Cinder Surprise. In case anyone, is because most of the bites in that pool bite earlier than Cinder Surprise does.
Mm-hmm.
It's unfortunate.
Yeah, I think Cinder is going to be unscathed for another expansion. Unless they come out with like a bait that really only bites sand eggs.
Hey, at least we can
prep would be
refresh
easier.
the intuition and get another, 15 seconds or something?
Not even. It overlaps. If you started
the
right, yeah.
The full length of the window. The intuition's 6 minutes and the window's 5 minutes 50.
Yeah, so as long as you do it like, if you trigger intuition, I think it's after 11:56 p.m. it'll be the full duration. Which I know we didn't talk about the intuition thing. We'll save that. I'm gonna save that for another conversation. But that's another big thing too. That's really, we haven't even started looking at, is what's the rate of intuition refreshing for all these things. So there's a lot to look forward to if you're a fisher in over the coming months and honestly coming year of as we finally start testing things. So we've been going for almost 2 hours, which I am sad to say I expected. um, is there anything that y'all want to say before we wrap up?
Well, one very last thing regarding kind of going forward, what we might expect. I want to say that after looking at all of the current holes that we have in Dawntrail, I think there are maybe 3 or 4 with 3 fish in them, but a majority of them have 4 fish. A few have more, but specifically the distribution is they've been very deliberate in allowing fishing holes to have 2 precision and 2 powerful hook set bites.
They've been very balanced, and I realize I glossed over this in our notes. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
The intent is it's not likely that we're going to be able to guarantee a new big fish in the same way we've been able to do with some of these old ones, just because obviously they're aware of what they've done to the Fisher toolkit, and are kind of adjusting our playground accordingly.
Yeah, for sure. I think when it comes to Dawntrail, I'm hoping we'll see new fish added when big fish are added that are hidden, but also are mooches. I think that could be a ton of fun where a big fish is locked behind a mooch fish. Maybe you can store it. Maybe you can't. We don't have that yet. And I think that could be a really interesting way of adding some difficulty and challenge to fishing and, balancing GP. Do you need to use chum? Should you not? Figuring those things out. In these balanced holes, I think Ambitious and Modest Lure would probably be better utilized with the hidden fish. And also, a lot of the fishing holes don't have a ton of fish in them either. I don't know if anyone else noticed that. There's like a lot of fishing holes that only have like 4 or 5 fish. Are they just going to add in more fish when the big fish get added and change up those numbers? If so, that means we have to redo a lot of testing. So I think looking forward with Dawntrail, we have a lot of probably more hidden fish. To your point, I think I would agree with what you're saying. Is we're going to probably see a lot more hidden fish rather than fish that will just benefit from getting from just modest lure spam.
So, and the kind of I was thinking about this the other day as well, from a pure discovery standpoint, if we have, say we get 8 new big fish in 7.1, and actually I don't know if I should say, if it is discovered that there is a new hidden message in the game, we're not going to know what fish that applies to. We're not going to know what hook set it applies to, so whether modest or ambitious lure. So in addition to all of our existing tests trying to figure out time conditions, weather conditions, there's a possibility we're trying to figure out, does a fish need a lure to bite? Do we need to have some people testing ambitious, some people testing modest, in addition to bait, time, weather? It's going to there is a potential that it greatly expands the discovery period, and that's something that is very exciting to me.
No, I think that's gonna be cool, and I don't know if any of you guys were around when Old Fish Eyes was a thing, but one of the things that we did when testing and looking for new fish was we would literally just run up to the fishing hole and use fish eyes. And if fish eyes gave us a buff, we knew that that's where one of the new big fish were going to be. And we knew it required fish eyes because at the time we didn't easily know that. So we're going to sort of see a similar thing now where we're not going to necessarily be looking for the fish to bite. If it's a hidden fish, we're just going to be looking for the message.
Yeah.
And that'll give us an idea of when and where that fish is going to bite. And I think that that's going to add a little bit more excitement to discovery. Which, to your point, you were also saying, probably 7.1, that is the expected first patch where we will get big fish. That has been the case since Shadowbringers, but before Shadowbringers, that was not the case. So there is precedence that we might not get a big fish or a set of big fish in 7.1, but it is the expectation. So I think discovery is going to be very interesting. Just looking for the hidden fish as well, and I'm hoping that we see hidden fish not just be a big fish, because that would imply that it would have to be a straight catch. I'm hoping that we see like, oh, you do need to use it to mooch, or oh, it's part of an intuition or something like that instead. I think that could be a lot of fun. I also think that a hidden fish that requires intuition, so you have to get the intuition and get the message proc off the hidden, would be absolutely evil, and I would love it very much. Kaf, anything that you want to add on hopes and dreams for Dawntrail fishing, specifically around Ambitious and Modest Lure?
No, I'm just really excited to see what we get, just because it felt like a lot of the Endwalker kit in particular got sort of underutilized with the actual big fish. So I'm excited to see. Very hopeful that doesn't happen again, since there's so much potential here.
Yeah, I think that would be my dream as well, is that we get a bunch of patches that actually really utilize our kit. And I think we've already started to see a lot of the common tier fish that we've gotten in 7.0. There's a lot of them that are already more interesting than most of the big fish we got in Endwalker. And I think the fact that we didn't get a GP regeneration skill or trait at level 100 for the first time in a while also is them realizing, yeah, they have way too much GP. Let's start giving them other things instead. And hopefully we'll start seeing a little bit more creativity go into these fish. And we're going to be using Ambitious and Modest Lure a whole lot more. So any final thoughts on anything in general?
If I can just kind of dump my final thoughts here. I'm just really impressed that they have added skills that are so powerful and basically retroactively affect pretty much every fishing hole in the entire game like this. Nerf a bunch of old fish. And don't appear to have basically straight up murdered anything the way that Surface Slap did, which is like kind of the last example I can think of a skill that like really had an impact on everything in the same way. Like, yeah, like giant Timon like is so much easier now. Drepanaspis is so much easier, but like there's no unconditional, there's no Hermit's End, there's no Moggle Mog Palm. There's nothing that's like been literally trivialized. And I think that's really kind of very impressive from a design perspective. And I think it speaks very well and is hopefully a good sign for the design aspect of the fishing skills going forward through Dawntrail, like the actual fishing stuff.
Yeah, I think that is something that is interesting. And one of the things that I have said with a couple of other people too is like, this is like the most well thought out fishing update. Either I don't know if it was intentional or not, but I would be led to believe it was. It was very well thought out. And just for the folks who are listening who may not know Hermit's End, Unconditional, and Moggle Mog Palm, in Shadowbringers we got a skill called Surface Slap, which when used on a fish that you just caught, removes the fish from the fishing hole. You basically cannot catch that fish while that buff is active. ambitious and modest lure do respect that slap as well when looking at rerolls. So if you slapped a fish, it will not reroll into that fish. But the addition of that fish, or of that skill specifically, made it so that those 3 big and legendary fish, which only had one other bite on their baits, you would just show up early now, catch the other fish, slap it, and then you would guarantee that proc. As Cap is saying, we don't really have that anymore. And Cap, I believe you put it to me in a conversation that it's non. I forget how you put it exactly now, but it's like non-deterministic. Like, it's surface slap is you slap it and you know exactly what's happening. With
That's the other thing.
lures, they're
It's
nebulous.
It's like surface slap and identical cast are like guarantee skills. Like, they're 100%. If you slap something, you know it won't appear. If you use identical cast, you know for a fact it will appear. But the lures are like the first skills we have that like just statistically alter the composition of the pool and aren't like a guaranteed alteration to it, which I think is interesting.
Surface slap does affect the bite rates of the pool, but it's, to your point, clear cut. It's very discrete. It's binary. It does or it doesn't. Whereas with the lures, it's very nebulous. So it's like, yeah, maybe it can. Maybe it won't do it as much. Maybe I'll still get the other bite. And it's also leads to a lot more of reactive fishing as well. Whereas with like surface slap and identical cast, that was proactive fishing, where you would show up early and you would get those things. Now it's reactive. If you get a proc, you have to, you do something different than if you don't. And I think that now that we have that mix in there, it makes Fisher like a very dynamic class. As haughty as it might sound, Fisher might be one of the deepest classes in the game now, in just terms of skill variety and uses. So, I think I agree that this is one of the biggest updates, or one of the biggest skills since Surface Slap, and definitely very impactful on a similar scale, even though it's not the same way.
Also, this is just me kind of being a little salty, but Surface Slap is very boring because you would just know what the highest bite rate you don't want is, and you would Surface Slap it. But now there's actually like, even with Surface Slap, is like a decision making process. It's like what fish to Surface Slap is actually like a decision you have to make sometimes, depending on like what you're like, the GP cost of luring, the GP cost of a bunch of stuff. Like, there's actually like a little bit of a decision making process and stuff. Like, you don't even have to Surface Slap anymore from Aru Crab, which is like interesting.
That's big deal, and that's useful. And I think the last thing I would say is, even though we're talking about how these skills are very impactful, it doesn't necessarily imply that you have to big fish, or you should only big fish at level 100. Like, these are very impactful skills, and definitely worth leveling Fisher to 100 for. But if you are going for, as far as we know, a good majority of these fish, you can just still get them using the slap and chum method. It's like we were talking about with Old Softy, which is a crayfish in Thanalan. It like the extra work, it might make it a little bit easier, but it doesn't necessarily make it easier enough to justify leveling. So if you're like level 71 and you have surface slap, yeah, still go for Old Softy. It's not gonna be that much different. So I hope one of the big takeaways here is that if you're listening to this, you're like, oh, I have to level to 100 to go big fishing. No, you don't. These skills are just another way of tackling fish in one of the now many ways that you're able to tackle a lot of fish.
We were big fishing at level 90 for like 3 years.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I mean, if all the free trial fishers out there have shown anything, who only just recently got surface slap. No, they don't have.
They don't have surface slap. They got double hook.
Sorry, they got
double hook, but they didn't get surface slap.
Yeah.
I I haven't even tried that yet. I haven't even tried fishing on a free trial account. I think, or as if I was a free trial account. I think that would be a ton of fun, though. As somebody who finds a lot of enjoyment in fishing in this game. So, all right, so for real now, any other final closing thoughts? Cool.
I don't think so, yeah.
I think we've covered most of everything. If you're listening to this, you probably don't believe that this now over 2-hour conversation only had 4 bullet points in it. 4 major bullet points in it. I'm not joking. So I wanted to thank Caf and Chaos for joining me on this ramble, where we talk about just the ambitious and modest layers and their just overall impact. Chaos, if you are on social media, where could people find you, either on social media or on Discord in the Fishcord? Like, if people wanted to chat, how best could they do that?
Yeah, I'm pretty. I'd say the best way, probably about fishing in specific, to get in contact with me is on the Fishcord, as it is known. I'm pretty active on there. All my other social media has a large variety of stuff on it, so maybe not as interesting. But yeah, feel free to stop by, ask a question in the Fisherman's Horizon Discord. Myself or one of the other expert anglers in there will be able to help out.
And Caf, same question to you.
Oh yeah, I'm in both Fishcord, and I'm also I'm on basically all my social media is just Caf Kaleo, CAFCOLEO, just the same everywhere.
And you also occasionally stream, I do believe, as well.
Yeah, I try to stream whenever I have the time, mostly fishing stuff. Sometimes it even goes well.
So, and again, for me, you can find me in the Fishcord. I am also on Twitter at FisherFruity. I have a YouTube, and I occasionally stream at Fruity Snacks or something like that. But for all that, if you have any questions, you can always just find me in the Fishcord. Thank you again to Caf and Chaos for sitting down and chatting about these skills that are already squaring up to be probably a big part of what fishers are going to be figuring out and dealing with and using for the next 2.5 years of Dawntrail, and probably later. So looking forward to see where it's coming, and maybe in a couple of years we'll come back to this and see how much farther we've gone with understanding the skills.
Join us in 3 years when we figure out what the actual rates are on everything.
So
yeah, thanks for having us.
I always appreciate having somebody else to talk to about fishing in a nerdy sense.
Thank you.
So all right, thank you everyone for listening, and good luck and happy fishing.